Get out of my restaurant, now! The manager's voice thundered through the fancy dining hall, causing every guest to freeze. A waiter dropped his tray, silverware clattering against the floor. At the center of the chaos stood Darnell and his family, their faces a mix of shock and humiliation. "We have a reservation," Darnell said, voice steady but tight. "This is a mistake." The manager smirked. "A mistake?" He pulled out his phone. "Fine, let's fix it. Security and the police are on their way." The room fell silent. Darnell clenched his fists. His young daughter gripped his hand tighter, and across the restaurant, a man in uniform stood up. The officer. And he wasn't reaching for his cuffs. He was walking straight toward the manager. What happens next? Watch to find out. The soft glow of candlelight flickered across the pristine white tablecloth, reflecting off polished silverware. The faint hum of conversation filled the upscale restaurant, mingling with the delicate clink of glasses. It was a place where elegance spoke louder than words, where status was determined not by character, but by wealth. Seated near the entrance, Darnell Carter adjusted the collar of his crisp navy blue blazer, his fingers brushing against the cufflinks his wife, Monica, had gifted him on their anniversary. His broad shoulders squared with quiet confidence, though his deep brown eyes carried the exhaustion of a man who had worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Across from him, Monica smoothed out her emerald green dress, a perfect contrast to her rich, dark complexion. Her curls framed her face, highlighting the determination in her gaze. A former journalist, now an advocate for social justice, Monica was a woman who had never backed down from a fight. But tonight wasn't about battles. It was about celebrating. Their daughter, Aaliyah, sat between them, barely able to contain her excitement. At 10 years old, she was wise beyond her years, her love for books earning her the affectionate nickname, Little Scholar. She twirled her fork between her fingers, eyes darting between the menu and her parents. "Can I order the crème brûlée for dessert?" she asked, beaming. Darnell chuckled. "You already know the answer." Monica smiled, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "You deserve this, Dee. You worked so hard for this promotion, and tonight is about celebrating you." Darnell exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Yeah. It's just crazy, you know? Growing up, I never imagined I'd be sitting in a place like this. I just wish my mom could see this moment." Monica squeezed his hand tighter. She would be proud. Just as Darnell lifted his glass for a toast, a shadow loomed over the table. A man in a sleek black suit, his name tag reading G. Sterling, Manager, stood with an air of forced politeness. His smile was tight, calculated. "Good evening," he began, his voice smooth but laced with something unspoken. "I just need to confirm your reservation. We seem to have an issue in the system." Darnell exchanged a glance with Monica before nodding. "Sure, it should be under Carter." Sterling tapped his tablet, his brows furrowing before a slow smirk tugged at his lips. "Ah, yes, Mr. Carter. It appears there was an oversight. Unfortunately, we won't be able to accommodate your party tonight." The words hit like a slap. Darnell straightened. "Excuse me?" Sterling sighed, tapping the screen again. "The table was double booked. It happens sometimes in high-demand establishments like ours." Monica's expression hardened. "That's interesting because I called twice today to confirm, and the hostess assured me we were all set." Sterling shrugged. "Well, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, but the table has already been assigned to another guest." Darnell clenched his jaw, heat rising in his chest. He had dealt with moments like this before, the subtle dismissals, the veiled insults hidden behind corporate smiles, but this time, his daughter was watching. Aaliyah's small fingers tightened around her napkin. "But we have a reservation, right, Daddy?" Darnell took a steadying breath, keeping his tone calm. "We do, and we confirmed it. So tell me, Mr. Sterling, what exactly is the problem?" Sterling's smirk didn't falter. If anything, it grew sharper. "The problem, Mr. Carter," he said, voice dropping slightly, "is that we have a standard to maintain, and sometimes misunderstandings happen when people don't fit the environment." Silence. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Darnell's fingers curled into fists beneath the table. He knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't about a reservation. This was about them. Monica sat up straighter, her voice like steel. "Are you saying my family doesn't fit into your environment, Mr. Sterling?" Sterling's smile never wavered. "I'm simply saying we have certain expectations for our clientele, and unfortunately, there are no available tables for you this evening." Darnell let out a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Aaliyah looked up at her parents, confusion clouding her features. "Daddy, are they saying we can't eat here?" Darnell met his daughter's gaze, anger simmering beneath his composed exterior. Before he could respond, a voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, sir." A man in uniform had risen from a nearby table, a police officer, except he wasn't looking at Darnell. He was walking straight toward the manager. The restaurant was dead silent. Every pair of eyes was locked on the confrontation at the front, where Darnell Carter stood tall, his family beside him, facing the smirking manager. The police officer, a middle-aged black man with graying temples and sharp eyes, strode forward with deliberate steps, his uniform pressed to perfection. The name tag on his chest read Lieutenant Raymond Brooks. His voice was calm but commanding. "Mr. Carter, is there a problem here?" Darnell turned to face him, his jaw tight. He recognized the look in the officer's eyes. It was understanding, recognition. Before Darnell could speak, Sterling, the manager, let out a dry chuckle. "No problem at all, officer," Sterling said smoothly, hands tucked behind his back like he was in control of the entire room. "This gentleman and his family were mistakenly given a reservation that doesn't actually exist. They were just about to leave." Darnell stiffened. "Leave?" His daughter's small fingers curled into his palm. Monica stepped forward, her voice low but firm. "That's not what happened, and you know it." Sterling's smirk widened just a bit, his eyes glinting with something dark and calculated. "Perhaps, Mrs. Carter, you and your family should consider dining somewhere. More appropriate." Eliah's lips parted. She understood. She understood everything. And Darnell felt something inside him snap. Darnell let out a slow breath, forcing down the fire in his chest. He could feel the weight of his daughter's gaze, the disappointment in her wide brown eyes. This wasn't just about a table. It wasn't just about dinner. It was about respect, about dignity, about every single moment in his life that he had swallowed his pride just to keep the peace. But tonight he wasn't backing down. "No." Darnell's voice was steady. "We're not leaving." Gasps rippled through the nearby tables. The manager's smirk faltered. "Excuse me?" Sterling's voice lost a bit of its slick confidence. Darnell took a step forward, closing the space between them. "You heard me." His voice was quiet but sharp. "We have a reservation. We're staying." Sterling's smirk vanished completely. He straightened, adjusting his suit like a man who just realized he was losing control. "Fine," he spat. "You want to make a scene? You leave me no choice." He snapped his fingers, motioning to the security guard standing near the back. A large, stocky man in a dark suit began moving toward them, expression unreadable. Aaliyah let out a tiny gasp, gripping her father's hand even tighter. Darnell could feel Monica shift beside him, her body tensing. Lieutenant Brooks cleared his throat loudly, stepping directly between Sterling and the security guard. "That won't be necessary," the officer said firmly. Sterling's jaw tightened. "Officer, I don't believe this is your concern." Brooks let out a low chuckle. "See, that's where you're wrong." With calm precision, he reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out his badge. But it wasn't just any badge. It was a gold-plated detective's shield. The restaurant fell into a stunned silence. "I'm not just a police officer, Mr. Sterling," Brooks said, tilting his head slightly. "I'm also a state investigator." The color drained from Sterling's face. The entire restaurant was now watching intensely, murmurs rippling through the space like waves crashing against the shore. Darnell blinked. This was unexpected. "Investigator?" Sterling forced a laugh, but his voice was thinner, shakier now. "For what?" Brooks took a slow step forward, his eyes locked onto the manager's. "For businesses that have a pattern of questionable policies." The words hung heavy in the air. A few customers exchanged knowing glances. Monica crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. "So this isn't the first time?" Sterling's mouth opened, then closed. Brooks continued, his voice calm but unyielding. "We've been gathering complaints. Discrimination, harassment, denial of service based on race." He leaned in slightly. "You might want to get yourself a lawyer." Silence. Pure. Deafening. Silence. Sterling stumbled back, his expression a mixture of fury and fear. The security guard, realizing the situation had taken a sharp turn, immediately stepped away. Darnell looked down at Aaliyah. Her wide eyes were full of something new, not fear, hope. For the first time tonight, she saw what it meant to fight back. The restaurant was no longer Sterling's kingdom. Where once his voice carried authority, now it was reduced to a shaky whisper, his confidence crumbling as murmurs spread through the crowd. Customers whispered amongst themselves, some pulling out their phones to record the unfolding scene. Lieutenant Brooks stood firm, his presence commanding the room. His badge gleamed under the dim chandelier light, an undeniable symbol of truth and power. Darnell Carter remained where he was, shoulders squared, but there was no longer anger in his eyes, just clarity. "You thought you could get away with this," Brooks said, his voice low but sharp. "But the world is changing, Mr. Sterling, and so are the people in it." Sterling swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly. For the first time that night, he looked small. From the back of the restaurant, a woman in a navy blue pantsuit stepped forward. She was tall, poised, and carried an air of authority. The second she pulled out a business card and handed it to Brooks, Sterling's expression darkened with dread. "I'm with the state's Civil Rights Commission," the woman announced, her voice calm but firm. "We've received numerous complaints about this establishment. This will not go unnoticed." A murmur of agreement rippled through the diners. Aaliyah clung to her father's hand, her eyes wide as she realized what was happening. "So, does that mean he's in trouble?" she whispered. Darnell looked down at her, a small, victorious smile forming on his lips. "It means people are finally watching, sweetheart." Sterling staggered back, jaw clenched. He looked around the room, searching for a way out, but there was none. Justice had finally caught up to him. The weight of his own actions had buried him, and he knew it. Brooks turned to Darnell and Monica, giving them a respectful nod. "I believe you and your family have a dinner to enjoy." Aaliyah beamed as a hostess, now visibly flustered, hurried over with menus. Monica kept her gaze locked on Sterling for another beat before exhaling, turning to Darnell. "Come on, babe, let's eat." For the first time all night, Darnell felt like he could breathe. He pulled out a chair for his daughter, watching as she sat down with her head held high. Justice hadn't erased what happened, but it had ensured it wouldn't happen again. Not here, not tonight, not ever. As the scene fades out, Darnell lifts his glass for a toast. He meets Monica's eyes, then Aaliyah's, and smiling softly, he raises his glass. To standing up. What did this story teach you? Would you have done the same as Darnell? Have you ever faced injustice like this? What would you tell Aaliyah about moments like this? Comment below and share your thoughts. Share and subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and reveal the truth. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new video.